They called him Anovir the Elder, though Elder now felt a cruel mockery in the cold silence of his tower study. The weak rays of the coming sunset illuminated the chaos of his life's obsession. Ancient tomes stacked precariously, scrolls spilling from overflowing shelves like frozen waterfalls of parchment, and arcane instruments gathering a patina that only time and neglect can create. The air hung thick with the scent of aged paper, dried herbs, and a faint underlying musk of something much older. Pausing from his studies for just a moment to stare at a lone dust mote suspended in a sunbeam, Anovir reflected on his youth, his apprentice days when he was no more than a fledgling mage, his spirit alight with a naive spark to do good, to heal, to protect, to understand the intricate weave of magic that bound the world. These were his youthful oaths. He dreamed of leaving a legacy etched in light, a benevolent mark upon his existence. But now, nearly a century later, that vibrant vision had muted, the light had dimmed, and his own legacy carried a bitter taste against his frail mortality. His hands, once steady enough to write the most elegant of script, now trembled uncontrollably. His mastery of powerful magics now relegated to calming the tremors of an old man as he crouched over a blackened tome, its pages holding secrets of forbidden power. This was no ordinary book. The cover was cold, icy to the touch, and seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Runes etched in a metal that resembled dried blood pulsed faintly in the dimness, their abyssal script promising both torment and transcendence even as it beckoned him. Wrinkled fingers traced the blasphemous lines of text, not with reverence, obsession. Anovir read with a feverish, desperate craving for knowledge as the aging wizard neared his mortal end. His eyes, once the brilliant emeralds of youth, were now clouded and gray, yet they still glinted with a disturbing hunger as he devoured the nefarious words inscribed upon those cursed pages. Each glyph was a hint, each sentence a seduction, leading him deeper into the labyrinth of profane magic from which few escape. Impatience gnawed, a ravenous beast in his gut, for time, that uncaring and ruthless thief, was closing in. He felt its icy grip as desperation coiled in his chest, squeezing the breath from his lungs, leeching warmth, sapping strength, stealing life.
Why did I wait so long? Why such struggle to commit, to accept these dark gifts?
The question was rhetorical, a self-flagellation born of his own fear and regret. He could hear their whispers already, the vultures circling his dwindling flame. The younger mages, the ambitious council members, his own family, all waiting impatiently for him to simply fade away quietly.
Yes,
He muttered, turning another brittle page.
how convenient it would be were I to just die silently in my bed, to relinquish my power, my knowledge, my secrets. But I have so much yet to see, so much yet to do.
His murky eyes narrowed, focusing on some unseen horizon.
Convenience. Huh. I need only time. Curse them all. Let me be inconvenient.
The word hissed from his lips, a venomous declaration against the inevitable. Being the most powerful wizard in the realm, a title spoken with awe and envy in equal measure, was a hollow victory against the relentless march of time. Power was ephemeral, influence fleeting, but time was the ultimate currency, and Anovir was running out. For years now, this forbidden secret had consumed him, hidden beneath the veneer of scholarly pursuits and arcane research. He had long sought the means to transcend the limitations of flesh and bone, to unlock the secrets of Lichdom. And now, here it was. The culmination of years of blasphemous study and bargained abyssal pacts with entities best left unnamed. Before him, in a vial crafted from black glass that seemed to swallow the light, sat the dark potion of transformation. It pulsed with a viscous, oily luminescence, its foul stench promising the dying embers of his mortal life the cold reality of undeath. With trembling hands, the elderly wizard raised the vial to his lips. The repulsive, fetid contents seemed to writhe within the glass, eager for their unholy escape. He whispered the long-practiced incantations, ancient ritual words of power stolen from abyssal tongues. The air around him crackled like thunder as sinister energies coiled and writhed, unseen dark powers of the chaotic abyss answering his desperate summons. He closed his eyes, taking a final, shuddering breath of mortal air. Then he spoke his final words as Anovir, the words of a man cornered, a soul desperate for any escape from the natural order.
There is no cost too great when the alternative is the black void of nothingness.
And with that grim pronouncement, he tilted the vial back, allowing the mephitic concoction to spill into his mouth. His body recoiled instantly and violently, every instinct screaming in protest and revolt. It tasted of bile and ground glass, searing his tongue and gums like liquid fire, dissolving the delicate membranes of his mouth. He tasted his own blood mingled with the foul sludge as it slid down his throat, a burning, icy trail leading down, it seemed, directly into his soul. He fought his body's instinct to purge the vile intrusion, forcing himself to swallow, to accept this liquid damnation. And then the ritual was complete. As the last drop of the potion vanished, so too did his mortality. He could feel the blackness growing within him, the warmth of life replaced with the glacial embrace of undeath. A sinful decay consumed him from the inside out. His eyes, once clouded with age, crumbled to dust, leaving empty black sockets that ignited with a spectral clarity that pierced the veil of the cosmos, a new terrible vision looming in the glistening dark. The vibrant hues of life leached away from his skin, leaving behind a gray, desiccated husk stretched taut over bone. A symphony of torment and physiological betrayal tore through Anovir, a pain beyond mortal comprehension. Yet amidst the unraveling of his physical form, a strange detachment settled over his mind. His mortal body, his mortal name, they felt meaningless now, unwanted, unnecessary. Outside his tower, the skies churned with unnatural speed and chaos. A dark wind swept through the land, carrying with it the stench of contempt, indifference, and decay. Now an immortal, the Lich spoke the first words of his new, unholy rebirth. "Villanir," he intoned with a sinister smile. He raised the skeletal hand as a black flame danced in his palm, the Lich staring into the violet fire, a silent acknowledgement that this was the first spark of the cruel inferno he would soon unleash upon the world. And as he gazed out at that darkened horizon, he mused at the unaware populace below. They were not prepared for the dread now awakened. This realm would soon write stories of the treacherous, terrifying deeds to come. As we start Volume 2 of this series, I was reflecting on my research for Volume 1, where we discussed the real-world origins of the Lich, going back centuries and across many dissimilar cultures, each with their own version, multiple versions in some cases, of a Lich, vampire, or some hybrid type of undead. We lightly covered the well-traveled paths of the Revenant, familiar to most of my audience, as well as one of my favorite undead, the Norse legend of the Draugr, a fallen warrior lich of sorts, forever stalking the living near sacred battle sites. Then I only touched upon some of the more obscure undead myths of antiquity, such as the Celtic Dullahan, told through centuries of tales and likely an inspiration for the Headless Horseman found in the legend of Sleepy Hollow. The haunting Ubume, a yokai or aberration, one of the more haunting legends of female tragedy conveyed through stories of Japanese folklore, and the West African version of a vampire that you will likely never find anywhere near Ravenloft or in a Castlevania game. the ravenous Obeifo, born through black magic and passed down through generations of the Ashanti people. However, truth be told, I did none of them justice. This is a series on the Dungeons & Dragons Lich, and those breadcrumbs served their intended purpose, to show traces of lineage. Still, I was amazed at the sheer number of religious and pagan mythologies, folktales, and legends that exist as analogs or even inspiration to the modern-day Lich. Just take a look at this partial list that I compiled with about 30 minutes of research. I bring this all up for two reasons. The first, it's fascinating to me, but then again, it combines my love of RPG fantasy with real-world history, so that's not much of a surprise. But more importantly, I think that creating some dedicated volumes to one or more of these undead legends would make for a compelling and wholly unique way to continue our Lich series in a way maybe not done before, or simply start a new series. That said, I have to at least acknowledge this is stepping a little bit out of the D&D lore box, but what do you think? Would you be interested in some undead lore based on ancient real-world mythologies and folk horror? There are polls up on both the channel's community tab and over on my Patreon, so please vote and let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will have a graphic on each of the polls so you can tell me if you think there's any specific undead legend that's most interesting to you. So be sure to tell me what you think. But we're just getting warmed up. There's so much more to uncover about this unholy Lord of Undeath in the chapters to come. And if you're a fan of creative world building, then stick around to the end, as I have an entire chapter dedicated to providing you a one-of-a-kind phylactery, just a sample of the types of homebrew and DM resources available over on my Patreon. Links below. So you are a high-level wizard or some other powerful caster, and you want to become a lich. I'm not even going to ask why, because the answer is never good. But your first question is most likely, how does one achieve this level of dark immortality? I'm going to reluctantly provide you this lore, but first, a warning. Lichdom represents one of the most compelling and terrifying elements across all editions of the lore. In unlocking the secrets of Lichdom, one not only is seeking the ultimate prize of immortality, but in doing so, the mortal spellcaster is accepting that he or she will transcend the boundaries of life and death to willingly accept the dark gift of undeath, albeit becoming one of the most feared undead beings in existence, but still, you're a member of the undead, forever. As we covered in Volume 1, at least the concept of Lichdom has been a constant presence in the game since the earliest editions, evolving in details to slowly unveil the actual steps required to reach this most unholy of achievements. At its core, Lichdom almost universally represents two desires of mortal casters. The first is a means of defying what most consider the unavoidable march of mortality and death. I suspect the allure of eternal life in whatever form the Lichdom promises for some grows steadily as the mortal body begins to wither and a once razor-sharp mind begins to decline. Second is, of course, the incessant thirst for power. Knowledge is power, and for a powerful master of the arcane or dark arts, this could not be more relevant, because eternal knowledge requires eternal time. And regardless of the longevity of whatever race you belong to, the timeline of one's mortal lifespan will, without fail, become the limiting factor in your knowledge acquisition. And so to those with the mastery that are also willing to pay the steep price it demands, Lichdom allows them to transcend these limits, giving them centuries, perhaps millennia, to obsess over their tomes, amass forbidden knowledge, perfect their craft, and ultimately attempt to shape the world to their will. But I mentioned a steep price. This unending existence comes at a great personal cost. Achieving Lichdom strips away all of what defines humanity, and over time, Liches lose all emotional connection to not only their own former lives, but to the living in general, succumbing to cold, cruel, calculating selfishness, and sometimes outright madness as they pursue their increasingly abstract and dangerous obsessive goals. But okay, I've given plenty of warnings by now. If you're still dead set, excuse the pun, on taking this path, then let's talk some specifics. Even in the modern 5th edition lore, much of the process is nebulous, and that's on purpose, and I'll expand on the more obscure steps in the next chapter. But we do have some canonical information in the lore, so let's review that first. In addition to your humanity, there are also some hard costs required, and this is in the form of what else but gold. And if you're a lich on a budget, then I'm sorry to inform you that you've long missed your budget window. A 2nd edition lich could get the ball rolling for under 2,000 gold. But just like the world of the real, inflation has reared its ugly head, and as we evolve through the 3rd, 4th, and 5th editions, the costs have skyrocketed to well over 100k just to get started. While that is a hefty inflation rate to be sure, I think we can all agree that this increased money sink will be a pittance to any caster considering this impious path to everlasting life. Despite the evolving lore over the last 5 decades, slowly unveiling new aspects of the Lichdom process, many of these are no more than guidelines and some high-level requirements, which is exactly how it should be. Becoming a lich is so much more than a mechanical process, and you don't get to say, hey, I just leveled, here's my 120k, presto, make me a lich. At least at my table, no sir or ma'am, that's not even close. Discovering the actual secrets of lichdom are meant to be a near impossible task, so leaving many of the steps nebulous empowers game masters and world builders to create the actions and experiences that are to follow. One of the best and most recent examples of adding nebulous requirements that I touched on in Volume 1 can be found on page 203 of the 5e Monster Manual, where we learn that in order to gain the knowledge of lichdom, one is required to make a bargain with some form of higher dark power, and that this most often results in the entity requiring some form of fealty or great service in return. I love this. The secrets are guarded and prized by powerful beings such as Orcus, the demon prince of the undead, or one of the archdevils of the 9 hells. Or heck, go off script. Perhaps you have some homebrewed ancient deity or ancestral spirit that is connected to your campaign or realm. Lichdom is not for the faint of heart, and it requires the embracing of evil and unspeakable acts to receive its dark gifts. So yes, you must be an incredibly powerful caster, but your dark journey's just begun with many challenges and dangers ahead. And if you think you're going to unlock all the secrets required over a weekend, well, you're going to be very disappointed. So plan early, long before you need a walker or start forgetting the names of the apprentices under you. So far, we have only really learned that discovering the secrets of lichdom is difficult and mostly a black box, which, depending upon your view, means a device for dungeon masters to torture and kill you, or create some epic challenges, interactions, and adventures. Hopefully it's the latter at your table, but either way, it may take years, maybe even decades, of your character's life, all with no promise of success, and ultimately, you must find and bargain with a dark power that holds this secret knowledge. And any being that has this knowledge, has this power, also has all the leverage. This is not something that would ever be given freely. Parting with the knowledge will be both costly and self-serving, and the price will not be counted in gold or treasure. Power, influence, years of indentured servitude, perhaps lifelong fealty, and all this is just to gain access to the secret knowledge. And never forget, when it comes to the trade of souls and immortality, the field is riddled with liars and cons, so be on the lookout for those who hold nothing of value, but will peddle you lies, looking for easy gains from the gullible and naive, as well as dark powers from fiends to gods who have the knowledge but no intention of sharing. And if that was not all bad enough, other liches will often misdirect or spread false information in order to derail your aspirations. After all, the fewer rivals, the better. You are dealing with some of the most treacherous of evils across the multiverse, so don't expect a better business bureau or 5-star Amazon reviews. So players be wary, and dungeon masters be witness. Okay, you now know that unlocking Lichdom might be the longest and most challenging journey of your character's life, and that success is likely rated something closer to 0 than 100%. But let's say that you do, finally, gain access to the knowledge. You've spent years making some morally questionable choices. You've successfully completed some truly challenging trials and tribulations, and you quite possibly have sold a good portion of your eternal soul to some dark power or god, all in service of acquiring the most forbidden and guarded of knowledge to achieve immortality. So what is it? You're not an immortal lich yet, so what did you just sell your soul for? Well, if you ask a holy paladin or a solar angel, they will tell you nothing good. But if you ask most dungeon masters or world builders, we would tell you a universe of creative potential. Fundamentally, the secrets of Lichdom provide the following knowledge: the ritual spells required to create, imbue, and enchant the holy artifact known as the Phylactery, as well as the recipe, ingredients, and most importantly, another ritual spell to enchant that vile concoction that will then become the Potion of Transformation. I would add here that the lore is pretty vague, but I personally have always maintained that the recipe and ingredients for the Potion of Transformation vary by each and every aspiring lich. To me, the idea that there's a single ingredient list, like the Colonel Sanders KFC recipe, doesn't make a lot of sense. Having a changing dynamic set of ingredients lets me create tailored encounters, but your mileage may vary. We'll break down the specifics of the Phylactery and the Potion of Transformation in the next 2 chapters. To seek immortality is such a lofty, arrogant goal. Few are those that possess the power or will to achieve it, and even fewer still are as desperate or mad enough to pay the steep cost. Yet, here we are, secrets unlocked, and the path to immortality will soon be paved in sacrifice and suffering. The first and most important task is to now create a Phylactery, the vessel charged with protection and long-term storage of the Lich's soul, thus providing it with the immortality it gave up so much to acquire. And what form should this Phylactery take? This choice should carry the same weight as your decision to become a lich in the first place, and definitely not one to be made in haste. The aspiring lich must craft a Phylactery that is suitable for such a critical task. You're not just grabbing a vial off the alchemy table and calling it a day. There's a lot to consider. The Phylactery is an object of great power and certain evil, and one that must withstand the ravages of time on scales far beyond mortal understanding, not to mention forces that will eternally seek to destroy you for who and what you are. From vainglorious heroes to arrogant celestials, and even jealous rival liches, each looking to end your immortal reign. Yes, the Phylactery is the single most important possession of a lich, for if it's destroyed, then the lich's tether to its hard-earned immortality is now broken, and the clock is ticking before it is immortal no longer. You must think about enchantments such as wards and other creative arcane magics to offensively or defensively safeguard your immortal soul. Now, the more common forms of Phylacteries include amulets, rings, boxes, even artifacts, weapons, and books. But there are other forms of protection to consider, such as camouflage and deceit. And this will differ from table to table, but the Phylactery as a, quote, container can be open to interpretation and some artistic license should the DM or world builder choose. Can the Phylactery be a puzzle box, the jewel in a hilt of a dagger, or a large metal urn? Well, of course. But why not also consider a Phylactery being the paint in a portrait, the ivory keys of a piano, or the strings of a harp? are those containers? Like I said, it's all about collaboration between the DM and the player. I, for one, lean heavily into the creative, so at my table, if it's possible, heck yeah, those are in play. Okay, so you have at this point perhaps spent years on a difficult journey. You've gained the knowledge, studied the rituals, created and enchanted the Phylactery, but you're not a Lich. You are still immortal. So now what? Now it's time to do a little soul searching. Think about all the people you've cruelly and callously hurt thus far in your process, and ask yourself, do you really want to do this? Perhaps you need to see a priest, for confession or an exorcism. No? Well, if you still want to voluntarily become one of the undead, then for the next step, you will need to create a potion that will transform your body into an undead lich while preserving your immortal soul. Hey, it's that easy, really? No, not really. This is no ordinary potion you can buy in your local apothecary, not by a long shot. In fact, you cannot buy this potion anywhere across the multiverse. It cannot even be made for you. It must be created by you and can only be consumed by you. And the creation of this potion, like everything else in this ritual, is a difficult and time-consuming task. How difficult? You have no idea. The potion itself contains rare, horrible, and dangerous ingredients. Acquiring each is designed to be a quest in and of itself. There will be no Eye of Newt or bat wings in this potion. Further, even after you have all the ingredients, which might take months, years, who knows, the potion's creation may still require additional powerful necromantic rituals and/or the involvement of evil, extraplanar entities or powerful unholy artifacts. If you plan to source what little canonical information exists on the Potion of Lichdom, then this is also where you might have to tread a little lightly, at least making sure that you align with any agreed-upon Session 0 information. Because through the many versions of lore, there was a time when the semi-canonical ingredient list for this potion was, shall we say, not politically correct by today's cultural standards. I mean, if Wizards doesn't want us to step in Athos anymore, then I think it's safe to say that some of the more gruesome ingredients published in the 80s were a product of their time. But honestly, this is a little concern to me personally because the ingredients for the Potion of Lichdom should be more about challenge than how many unicorns you might have to slaughter. The important concept here is that the one or two key ingredients are really as much about concept and challenge than they are about a material component. Sure, it has to have a material component or an essence, but we're talking about immortality here, not a healing potion, so maximum effort, at least at my table, will be required. As an example, and this is directly from my own style of world building, it's certainly not canon, well, honestly, there really is no canon here, but a Potion of Lichdom might require as its key ingredient something of core material but high challenge, such as the dust of a Dracolich bone. And to avoid finding this on some high-level wizard, have the requirement be the dust must be no more than X number of days from the Dracolich being slayed. Or go high concept, something like the final ingredient requiring the distilled madness of an aboleth. Obviously, not only is this not something you can buy or find anywhere for that matter, but you can't exactly take it off a defeated aboleth. Good luck with that anyway. Or even if you bargained for it, how would an aboleth give you its madness? The best and most recent example I can share comes from a recent video lore profile I completed on the Clockwork Lich. In that story narrative, an artificer seeking his own lichdom made a dark pact with Gonador the Elder Eye. As part of his potion of transformation, the recipe called for the tears of a Marut. It did not take long to realize that challenge rating 25 constructs from Mechanus do not cry. But the symbology unveiled in that lore video shows what I think is a textbook example of how to create, incorporate, and acquire exotic materials and reagents for this ultra-powerful potion. And this is where the fun begins, at least for me. I would set up a whole campaign around this. And by the way, this idea, all these ideas, they don't have to be a part of the Lichdom process. You could use any of this for any party, under any campaign, for any alignment. But given the aboleth and its aquatic themes, I would world build an artifact. We could call it the spyglass of tidal subjugation, or maybe it's a pearl amulet. Using the artifact, one can weaken the aboleth's formidable psionic powers and extract a fraction of its madness, manifesting as a swirling, iridescent, almost mist that constantly shifts in color as it churns like the ocean. It pulsates with the aboleth's dark thoughts and fragmented memories that lie far beyond any type of mortal comprehension. The pearl in our amulet or spyglass is capable of storing the distilled madness, but only for a limited time. Again, this places a critical time element on our epic quest. This is just one example, but I would be supremely negligent in my duties if I did not also mention that I have created a full listing of custom phylacteries, potions of Lichdom key ingredients, and the adventure quest hooks for them, along with an ever-growing library of homebrew and world-building PDFs and art packs from this channel's lore videos over on my Patreon. Links below. To become a Lich is to, for all intents and purposes, cheat death, to bind the mortal soul in undeath through blasphemous rituals to a carefully crafted anchor, the Phyactery. Phylactery, a word that far more often than not is met with one of two reactions by players. Some form of, "What the heck did you just say? Is that really a word?" Or, "Ah, Lich incoming." Off the top of my head, I cannot think of another word in the entire Dungeons & Dragons or RPG lexicon that is more intrinsically tied to one creature. And for good reason. The Phylactery and the Lich are inextricably linked. No Phylactery, no Lich. The Phylactery, especially if safeguarded well, is the Lich's get-out-of-jail-free card, and in its most basic form, it is a container or receptacle. But the typical phylacteries are often quite predictable, and I have too often seen this wonderful world-building device become a bit of an afterthought, taking the all-too-common forms of a box, an urn, a book, or maybe a gem. And while those are stereotypical and certainly not unique, those forms can be perfectly fine so long as you take the time to craft layers of associated backstory, powers, mechanics, and some creative world building to support it. If there is a Lich and therefore a phylactery tied to your adventure, then the soul vessel should, in almost all cases, become a significant part of the overall story arc, and the phylactery 100% of the time should be integral, even critical, to the Lich's own story. In my humble opinion, the most potent magic of an adventure or campaign lies not in the expected, but in the creative transformation that conjures the unexpected and the unique. In this chapter, we will challenge the boundaries of the typical and dare to ask ourselves, is the phylactery truly just a container, or could it be something far more nuanced, far more intertwined with the Lich's identity? To truly grasp the phylactery, we must examine the nature of the Lich's soul. Lichdom and the undeath it grants is a fracturing of the mortal soul, a deliberate severing from the natural cycle of life and death, with a portion of the soul intentionally bound to the material plane. And the phylactery is the conduit, the tether through which this anchor can exist. So regardless of the form it may take, the phylactery serves a critical and often mechanical function. When a Lich is destroyed, at least in the conventional sense, be it by sword, spell, or even divine intervention, their physical body ceases to function. But unlike mortal creatures, the Lich's soul does not fully depart for the fugue plane and a Kelemvor-judged afterlife. The Lich is a creature that operates outside those boundaries of life and death. Instead, thanks to the dark ritual of Lichdom and the presence of their phylactery, a fragment of the Lich's soul is drawn, sometimes rather quickly, other times a bit slower, but always inexorably back to the phylactery. In some respects, the Phylactery is really less about containing the soul and more about establishing a persistent link, that tether, to the material plane. The magic woven into the Phylactery as part of the process of Lichdom acts as a focal point, a nexus of unholy energy that resonates with the Lich's fragmented soul. And given time, depending upon the fates we call the roll of the D10, a reunification allows the Lich's soul to coalesce, draw upon surrounding necrotic energies, and in all its profane glory, rebuild the Lich's physical form sometime between 1 and 10 days. And this process is key as it highlights the role of the Phylactery as far more than just a static object. It's an active component in the ongoing existence and immortality of the Lich. Its durability and protections are essential to ensuring the cycle of undeath can continue, the Lich's immortality. A fragile Phylactery is a useless Phylactery. Just ask Pyronius from my Clockwork Lich video. Therefore, the form it takes should align with its protections and its safeguards. And it's here that we start to ask some important questions. Where is the Phylactery going to be kept? How well protected is it? What challenges must the players overcome to even find it, let alone destroy it? By moving beyond the container mentality, we can start thinking about the Phylactery as a narrative engine, a source of adventure hooks, and a way to deepen player investment. Now that we understand the role, function, and importance of the Phylactery, we can begin to ignite our imagination and explore its potential. A creatively designed Phylactery elevates the Lich from a generic monster to a memorable antagonist. It transforms the Phylactery encounter from a simple find and smash quest into a meaningful story moment. One of my own go-to world-building approaches is to thematically align the Phylactery in such a way that it becomes a window into the Lich's past. It might hint at their obsessions, ambitions, or even fears, but in my creations, the Phylactery always has its own story to tell, and it's almost always deeply personal, with a connection to the Lich's past, its life as a mortal. This, in my opinion, provides a number of benefits, from enhancing the Lich's villainy through its personality, ambition, and motivations, to unique mechanics of the Phylactery itself that add unique challenges, moral dilemmas, or memorable experiences. So maybe you're convinced creative Phylacteries are the way to go, but how do you actually create this narrative magic? It's about applying some key design principles, practical steps to crafting memorable and effective Phylacteries. And first, let me preface the remainder of this chapter with the disclaimer that these are just my opinions. This isn't math where the answers are one-dimensional and right or wrong. What works for one table or DM might not work for another. So to save me from repeating the phrase, just know that most every word I say from here on out is, well, my opinion. That out of the way, I will start by offering that a creatively designed Phylactery is not just about making the Lich harder to kill. It's about making the Lich's story, as well as the overall campaign or adventure, unforgettable. And we make these strong memories by establishing a thematic connection, starting with the Lich. Who were they in life? What were their obsessions, their magical specialties, their defining traits? The Phylactery should be a reflection of that Lich's identity. A fate-obsessed Lich? Perhaps a Phylactery that takes the form of a tarot-like card deck. A sea captain Lich? The eye of a kraken or a sunken anchor might be their soul vessel. The theme should dictate the form. Next, consider gameplay integration. Don't design a Phylactery in isolation. Think about how it will interact within the game. How can the Phylactery create challenges, puzzles, skill tests, or even moral dilemmas for the players? Should the Phylactery be woven into the lair environment and encounter design? If so, consider its integration into lair actions, environmental hazards, or even regional effects. My third principle is to embrace misdirection and intrigue. You don't want the Phylactery to scream, "Hey, look at me, I'm obviously the Phylactery." Incorporate some level of obfuscation, both through its arcane properties and wards, but also its native form. by making the Phylactery seem like something else entirely, a valuable treasure, a harmless and not very Phylactery-type object, or even a potential ally, you create a level of intrigue that rewards player investigation. Now, we need to pause here because with great creative power comes great responsibility. While imaginative phylacteries can elevate your game, they can also introduce potential pitfalls if not carefully considered beforehand. We must always remember that our goal is to challenge and intrigue our players, not frustrate or alienate them. So it's important to discuss and navigate any potential pitfalls and the best practices to avoid them. The first pitfall lies in the realm of obscurity versus discoverability. It's tempting to make a phylactery too clever, too hidden, or too obtuse. But if players have no reasonable way to discover the phylactery's location or its nature, it becomes less of a challenge and more of a frustrating brick wall. And the best practice is to provide that clarity through ample clues. Subtlety and misdirection is good, but outright trickery is not, so ensure you provide proper breadcrumbs. Ensure there are more than enough clues, hints, and opportunities for players to deduce the phylactery's true nature. Scatter information throughout the adventure, place clues in the environmental details, and seed hints and NPC interactions, all to reward player agency and cleverness, letting your players feel like they earned the discovery. Remember to employ the poke and prod principle. Persistent investigation should always yield some form of positive result. The goal is for every player to feel clever when they figure something out, not lucky or like they just stumbled upon it randomly. There's no glory or satisfaction there. Another easy pitfall can be found in creating overly complex mechanics. Intricate puzzles and multi-stage rituals can be engaging, but avoid making them needlessly convoluted or reliant on obscure knowledge. Complexity for complexity's sake can bog down gameplay and lead to player disengagement, and this is especially important when it comes to puzzles and riddles. Know your table. Some players really enjoy this facet of the game, while others not so much. This should be explored during the Session 0 so you understand the preferred playstyles of your table. My best advice here, should heavy logic be something your players do enjoy, is to offer meaningful interactions that are not predicated on difficulty alone. Puzzles and riddles should be solvable through in-game clues and player ingenuity, not DM fiat or arbitrary leaps of logic. Focus on mechanics that are thematically relevant to the Lich and the Phylactery, while ensuring both that the challenges are consistent while also offering alternative solutions or a way to bypass them altogether should the party begin to struggle. And finally, consider player choice and consequence. Offer players meaningful branch choices related to their desired actions with regard to the Phylactery. Do they wish to destroy it? Be sure there are multiple means and breadcrumbs that lead to each method. Do they want to exploit its power? Well, then confer both the benefits and the risks through in-game hints and clues. These types of choices only add depth and go a long way to enhance player agency. The ritual is complete. A dark pact with some colliginous entity has been sealed, and your ties to the mortal coil are now shed. Yet even for the Lich, true death still remains a constant threat, their semi-immortality bound forever by a lone artifact. Anchoring their fractured soul to the material plane while maintaining the Lich's undeath, the Phylactery is the linchpin and, in reality, the single point of failure in the Lich's unnatural existence. So it's no surprise that the Phylactery is unquestionably the single most important possession of the Lich, and perhaps the best example of the dictum of function over form. Still, it's quite possible for us to banish the pedestrian images of simplistic containers from our minds while not only preserving function, but in fact enhancing that stated purpose. For the discerning Lich, as well as the creative dungeon master or world builder, the Phylactery can be a vibrant canvas for dark artistry and narrative intrigue. and in this chapter, I want to share with you a fully detailed soul anchor that illustrates the potential of world building of Phylactery to this level. To do that, we will now plunge into the crushing agony of ocean depths as I share one of the most harrowing tales of pain and suffering. This is not a fable rich with shining seas and valiant heroes. Quite to the contrary, this ancient story is one of a cruel goddess, bargain struck of greed and desperation, and of a misery so profound it birthed a legendary monster, even by the standards of the unholy Lich. This mythology of thalassophobia horror is not for the weak, but serves as a cautionary tale for any mortal harboring any romanticized lore of immortality and lichdom by way of dark, unholy powers. Our discovery dives deep into the abyssal black of the trackless sea on Faerun's southwestern coast to enter the domain of the Lich known as the Dread Captain Morvain Grimwater and his Phylactery, the Drowned Anchor, forged in the lightless torments of salt water and sorrow. Here you can forget sunlight, forget warmth, forget even the faintest glimmer of hope. At this depth, the pressure becomes a physical presence, its grip a crushing weight that seeks to extinguish all light and all life. And it is here in the inky blackness that a colossal, rust-eaten behemoth of iron called the Drowned Anchor rests, its flukes half swallowed by the abyssal ooze as it forever strains to moor a phantom ship to the seabed of oblivion. Wrapped in an oily cloud, black as a starless void and thick as congealed blood, the ooze perpetually clings to its corroded surface, swirling, shifting, seeming to breathe with a life of its own. Attached to the sunken anchor are 8 massive chain links, each as large as a small human, their combined weight matching that of the colossal anchor itself. Yet, despite their hefty weight, these iron links seem to shimmer, even writhe, in the shadowed depths, undulating like a storybook sea serpent, pulsing with a faint, sickly green glow, a ghostly luminescence that only the abyss could truly witness. But how exactly did this esoteric phylactery come to be? For that, we must rewind to the mortal life of Morvain Bilgeman. I have a full, nearly 30-minute complete backstory on the Sea Lich that I've linked in the show notes and above you right about now. But to set up this phylactery, let me at least provide the cliff notes. Morvain Bilgeman was the son of a fishmonger who dreamed of being a captain upon the seas. Morvain was driven by a gnawing desperation for status and authority that was all-consuming. And it was the bitch queen of the sea who seized upon his ambition and longing. Umberly, as capricious and cruel as the storm she commands, answered. Her whispered lies promised him all he had dreamed and more, to become her champion of the seas. But her offer was a bargain worthy of any infernal Faustian pact, forged in prolonged agony and torment, and Morvain, as gullible and impatient as he was ambitious, failed to read the fine print. In his folly, he accepted her sinister pact of lies and half-truths, relinquishing his soul in exchange for that which he so desperately craved. The evil sea goddess had truthfully promised him the immortal undeath of Lichdom, but did so at a hidden price that would break any mortal mind. The agonizing ritual of Lichdom first began on a dread ghost ship in the heart of the trackless sea. There, Umberly watched as a crew of ethereal undead dragged Morvain into the deepest trench of her abyssal domain. Restrained by the ship's anchor and chain, Morvain watched as the light from above slowly faded. As he plunged deeper and deeper, his world suddenly went black, followed by excruciating pain as the extreme pressures crushed his eyesight and the soft tissues of his mortal body collapsed under the ocean's icy grip. His tortuous journey downward would eventually find the seafloor, where he would lie, somehow still alive, in a state best described as a purgatory for the undying. A middle state of undeath where pain is very real, but comes with no end, no calming release of death to ease the torment. And there he laid, for 2 centuries. Imagine that for a moment. 200 years of eternal drowning, lightless, airless, crushed by unimaginable pressures, a body dissolving and a mind fracturing, his soul steeped in the icy brine and despair of these abyssal depths. And it was in this crucible of suffering, in this unending misery and pain, that the sea lich, Morvain Grimwater, would be reborn 200 years later, a lich of extreme insanity and an incomprehensible thirst for vengeance. If that backstory primer was not too dark for you, then feel free to check out the full story of the sea lich in the link below. But we're here to talk about his Phyactery, the drowned anchor. For to stop the dread sea lich, this cruel Phyactery, an instrument of Umberlee's will, must be destroyed. A task that is far easier said than actually accomplished. Heck, even reaching the Phylactery's watery grave will be a test for most heroes. But even if the party is able to locate and reach the drowned anchor, the Phylactery is also protected by its own magical wards, both insidious and thematic, each a twisted reflection of Morvain's own mortal memories. But beware, for deception runs deep. Common logic might have you focus and fail on the anchor's rust-eaten iron or the oily black soul cloud while overlooking the true Phylactery that's hidden in plain sight, the chain. You see, each link holds a memory, a visceral echo of the life and agonizing transformation of that mortal man who would become Morvain Grimwater. Its mundane appearance as a simple part of the anchor is its greatest camouflage. And in the sheer difficulty of even raising such a massive object, many might simply give up, convinced the Phylactery is too well protected, never realizing the true vulnerability lies within the chain of memories once it's freed from the sea's embrace. The chain consists of 8 links and 2 different wards, though you're certainly free to add as many more as you would like. The first 4 links whisper of childhood and family devotion. The ward of sunken virtue. It paints an illusion of innocence and harmless tranquility in a 60-foot radius around the anchor. Here, innocence becomes a veil, hindering true sight. The water shimmers and distorts as light fills the area, creating a seemingly idyllic scene of vibrant blue as illusory schools of colorful, non-threatening fish dart playfully and phantom dolphins frolic. This is, of course, a visual deception, a comforting lie masking the malevolence of the Phylactery and disrupting any attempts to scrutinize it more closely. Mechanically, the area within the 60-foot radius of the anchor becomes obscured by distracting particulates and shimmering lights, imposing disadvantage on perception checks. Additionally, attempting to make investigation checks to examine the chain or the anchor itself within the obscured area will suffer disadvantage on that check, their senses clouded by the deceptive illusion. The second set of links are protected by the ward of brine-bound loyalty. The links pulse with a sickly green light and embody familial loyalty twisted into undead servitude. The ward's magics call forth spectral guardians from the surrounding seawater, vengeful spirits bound to protect the Phylactery with monstrous devotion. These guardians materialize as drowned sailors, their faces bloated and distorted. Something on the order of, say, 2 aquatic variant wraiths, balanced of course based upon your party level. These wraiths are fiercely protective of the drowned anchor and its chain, and as a reaction when an attack or spell targets any links of the chain, a wraith within 30 feet can interpose itself, becoming the target of the attack instead and taking all damage. Loyalty becoming a shield of undeath. To destroy this Phylactery, you cannot simply hack and slash at the anchor. You must undertake a task as arduous as Grimwater's own torment. You must raise the drowned anchor. From the crushing depths and through treacherous currents, battling spectral guardians and the anchor's own magical defenses, you must somehow lift this colossal weight to the ocean's surface. Only then, away from the salt water, away from the sea that sustains it, can the chain be detached from the anchor. Its echoing links can then be broken. But even then, the task is not done. The anchor and chain must be hauled to consecrated ground, a hallowed temple or other blessed site. Only there can a ritual of purification or exorcism be performed, focused on each chain link to finally sever Grimwater's soul and shatter his phylactery. Should you succeed, should you raise the anchor, perform the required ritual, sever the chain, and break the links, each will crumble into a pile of dust, and perhaps a faint whisper of gratitude might be heard on the wind, a final ethereal release and rest from centuries of unimaginable torment. But even then, the drowned anchor itself will remain, now a lifeless hunk of rusted iron, becoming an immovable grave marker and the permanent haunting reminder of the storm that birthed dread Captain Grimwater, the Lich of the Trackless Sea. So you unlocked the secrets, you've created a suitable phylactery, and now you've crossed the multiverse to acquire some crazy one-of-a-kind in the cosmos key ingredient. You would now be most justified in asking, are we there yet? And the answer is no. Hey man, no one ever said immortality was going to be easy. This is a pretty exclusive club you're trying to join. Now, with the exception of the Arch-Lich or any other type of good-aligned Lich, the aspiring villainous Lich now must commit an act of great sacrifice. And I don't mean himself, well, not yet anyway, that's coming. To complete the transformation, a significant act of great evil and sacrifice is required. This would most generally come at the request of the Dark Patron that sponsored the Lich candidate, the one that shared the secrets in the first place. And depending upon the entity, and really the DM, this can be another lengthy trial or quest or a simple task. But it must be horrific, of great evil and a sacrifice. This is not an or situation. Sacrifice is required. I mean, you're trying to become one of the most vile and evil beings in the cosmos and reach immortality, so killing a stranger won't cut it. Remember, the whole point of great sacrifice is to clearly abandon the last shred of humanity, ethics, moral code, and compassion, to fully embrace all facets of evil that is the immortal life of a Lich. So say goodbye to your best mate party member, a sibling, or a loved one. See my Ravenloft series for the high cost of such vile acts of villainy. Once done, then we are finally ready for the actual ritual of Lichdom, but don't drink the potion just yet. With the phylactery, potion, and sacrifice in place, the character must then perform a dark ritual to transfer their soul into the phylactery and complete their transformation into a dread Lich. At this point, we've now crossed the event horizon into full-blown homebrew territory. In truth, we left Cannonville long ago, so really the sky, or the 9 hells, is the limit. The ritual may require the character to recite ancient incantations, perform a blood sacrifice, or even open a portal to one of the lower planes and commune with some evil. The ritual is, of course, dangerous. Sorry, there's a no-return policy on the potion. Your ritual may well attract the attention of other powerful enemies, so the character must be prepared to defend itself and their phylactery. Another reason you bargain with the dark sponsor in the first place, so that they can protect you during the ritual. Once that ritual is complete, the transformation, the actual transformation, can begin. With the green light from whatever dark entity you bargained with, now, finally, you will consume what is likely the foulest tasting substance in the cosmos. But hey, there's no turning back now. You have begun the agonizing transformation into undeath. Your body will wither and decay, and yes, you will feel every frayed nerve. Your soul will detach from your body, now enclosed in the phylactery, and leaving you with a feeling that no mortal is capable of experiencing. After many hours, sometimes days, of this slow torment, you will emerge as a member of the immortal undead. You have paid a great cost, endured much, and forever lost your humanity. But being a newborn Lich is not without its perks. I mean, you are now immortal, full stop. Sure, you have immunities, regeneration, a paralyzing touch, and a gaze that would scare away your mother, but you will now unlive forever. So that's it. Oh, except, I knew I forgot something. Now that you're a Lich, I apologize, but I did forget one tiny thing. Did you happen to read the fine print on the potion bottle before you consumed it?
By consuming this potion of Lichdom, you agree to enter a bold new phase of existence where heartbeats are overrated and flesh is optional. Side effects may include severe skin irritation, read total loss, inability to keep weight on or off as bones are tricky like that, persistent odor of decay, and an unrelenting desire to mutter cryptic monologues in empty chambers. Users often report a sudden fondness for tattered robes and a lifelong struggle to accessorize beyond ominous. Results not guaranteed. Use at your own eternal peril.
Ouch. Always read the fine print, am I right? Raising the Sea Lich's drowned anchor, a nightmare. Liking, subscribing, and enabling notifications, much easier. It won't make you immortal, but it will make the YouTube algorithm happy, and frankly, that's the closest I'm ever getting to my own immortal lichdom. And if you join my Patreon, you'll get access to an ever-growing library of world-building resources, phylacteries, video art, adventures, the hierarchy of the Nine Hells, and so much more. It's practically a DM cheat code. Besides, it's cheaper than the process of lichdom and way less messy. Links are below. A sincere thank you to my Patreon and channel supporters that make this video possible. And thank you for listening. Until our next journey of discovery together, take care, my friends.